Hey guys, I'm here with Conner DeAngelis. This is my first time doing the John Thomas podcast. I'm used to being on these podcasts and not hosting, so this should be pretty fun. Me and Connor have been talking a lot through Instagram and exchanging ideas, so we figured it'd be a good time to just link up and talk about stuff. So actually, before I just turn this on, we are talking about, I was asking you, just now getting back to training and stuff, and you were saying that you're getting over an injury, right?
Yes, I just had a meniscus reconstruction surgery about 8 months or so ago, and I'm kind of slowly getting back into real training, I guess you could say.
Mm. How do you feel like, how have you been trying to train as you come back? Like, I feel like that's like a common question that I'm always grappling with myself, and I know a lot of people ask me about is like how much training volume do you think is too much? How do you like to
Sure.
train when you're injured and all those kind of things? If you have any broad perspective.
Yeah, of course. So I've started, obviously, I probably started training a little bit too early, maybe in the 5 month range. And I actually re-injured myself. I ruptured my
Mm,
bursa and that kind of slowed down the recovery process.
that
But
seems to be a
once that was
common
all
theme.
figured out, yeah, once that figured itself out, I started with drilling, and then I started with slightly more specific style drilling. And
That's
basically,
actually
due
a
to the
question. Sorry, the question I have there is
yeah,
like, one of the frustrations I always have when I get injured is that I'm like, okay, well, I can do some light drills or something. But then when I end up drilling with like no resistance, I almost feel like it's like almost worthless because I feel like it's not realistic. And then I always end up being like, can you give me a little bit of resistance? And then I end up getting in some kind of specific sparring, which usually
yeah.
ends up with me injuring myself again. But
No, I have a very similar experience.
yeah.
I would say I do exactly as you say. I start with the light drilling, and then I realize um, I don't know what to drill, and I've already kind of like drilled these techniques so much.
Yeah.
Why am I still drilling them? And then I start just like starting small, I would say 50% style rounds from different positions, whether it be De La Hiva, whether it be half guard, some sort of controlled scenario. And then that obviously picks up, depending upon the partner which I'm rolling with, into just like a full round. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, you kind of just get injured. So I have to almost hold myself back.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I'm kind of like at that 8 month, 9 month point in my recovery process. And I feel like I can roll 100%, but there's still a few positions in which scare me, especially like a fully flexed knee. Like if my knee, if this is full extension, if they force it into full flexion or like heel to butt, I still have a lot of, I don't want to say the word fear because I'm trying to stop using that word,
Yeah.
but I have a lot of fear when that happens. And
Has
I'm slowly getting over that.
do you feel like the injury has made you not only evolve your training methodology for when you recover, but also your actual technical game? I found often that what happens to me when I get an injury, like, oh, my right hip is injured, certain positions are not available when I roll. And then because I have to work around that, I'll end up playing something I don't normally play. But then that makes some sort of profound improvement in my game. And then even when I recover from the injury, I have like this new skill set that I didn't before.
No, I mean, you absolutely said it without a doubt. I feel like since the injury, I've actually started to study jiu-jitsu and understand, I guess you could say, the why behind jiu-jitsu a little bit further. Actually, somebody that you've done a podcast with not so recently, but the BJ Mental Models
Yeah.
guys. I started diving into some of their things, diving into some of Rob Bernacki, the Rory Van Vliet. Are you familiar with any of
Yeah, I
their
know of them a
material?
little bit. Yeah,
They have this whole theory of alignment, and it's
yeah.
a
Mm.
very neat theory that they have, talking about base, posture, and structure. And I was really into that, and I've been into it even still, and it has, I would say, improved my understanding of jiu-jitsu. I'm starting to understand further about levers, about biomechanics, and things like this, and all of this new information that I kind of disregarded in the past due to being so heavily focused on improving my competition game. That's what it's all about. Just making small little enhancements in little areas of my uh, game that I'm constantly trying to evolve. It has, for one, given me a better understanding of jiu-jitsu. Therefore, I'm a better teacher because of it. But outside of that, I also think it has improved my jiu-jitsu because you are seeing these kind of general concepts rather than just like this technique is for this, or this technique is for this, or I do this when I enter XYZ position and things like that. So it's, go ahead.
I often find that like general principles like that, they sometimes can be difficult to apply across the board. But what they can help a lot with is like, you know, if you, for example, if you understand the idea that, okay, if my opponent's, both of his shoulder blades are on the mat, he cannot come up, right? Like he has to lift one shoulder blade to be able to come up off the mat, right? So that like that principle fundamentally, if you understand it, can kind of like act as a useful tool in helping solve a problem. You might be like in worm guard, right? And you don't know like a specific answer to the situation that you are in. So you kind of have to like make something up on the fly. And sometimes having those general principles can function as a way to help you like generate a good choice. Actually, one of my friends, Tony Rotella, is a chess, he has a chess YouTube channel, he's a really good chess player. And I was visited and did a seminar at the gym he trains at, and we were talking a lot about the correlations with chess and jiu-jitsu. And one interesting thing was, you know, in chess, a lot of people, they memorize the openings, right? But at some point, like there becomes so many variables, you cannot like memorize everything, and you can only look so far ahead, because if the guy has like 20 possible moves, each time, then like 3 moves in, there's like, you know, like probably like 60,000 different choices of what could have happened at that point, right?
Of course.
So you have to like, outside of understanding these common patterns, you have to have kind of like a philosophy of making good choices. And that's something that I have found more recently in my game, is like, you always, if I can, my preferred is always to have a pre-planned answer for that situation. But you have to understand, especially when you're at lower level, if you're like a white or a blue belt, you're often going to be getting put in positions that you don't have a pre-planned answer for. And so having some of those concepts can function as a good way to help. They're not always necessarily true, but they can kind of help you have creative inspiration in the fly to come up with an answer.
No, I agree fully. And it's funny that you mentioned chess and the correlations to jiu-jitsu. While I was injured, that was one of my biggest stints of studying as well. I went into chess because I watched Josh Waitzkin's movie, Searching for Bobby Fischer.
Oh yeah, I grew up on that.
And then it's a good movie. And then I started watching that, and then I actually read his book as well, The Art of Learning.
Yeah,
I don't know if you dived into that. Really, really good book. And then I just started watching tons and tons of streamers of chess and trying to learn the process. And it really is, there's tons and tons of correlations, just like you said. But just like you said, you can't remember all of these crazy, intricate openings and finishes. You have to understand the general like goal and the concepts. It's much easier that way.
It's a really interesting idea as well. It's like very abstract, but I have often found that you know, you would think if you want to be a great competitor or you want to be really good at something, you know, what if you have 100 hours to invest, right? You would think, okay, well, I want to have the best spider guard in the world, so I'm going to invest all 100 hours into the spider guard, right? So then I'm going to have the best spider guard in the world. But there does seem to be this thing where when you work on things that are seemingly unrelated, often it will unlock something in the thing that you're not even working on. And it has happened enough times now that it's just very, it's like, it's such a common theme that it always happens to me, and I see it happen. I'm curious your thoughts if you ever had that happen, but like where you would think that like you should just only be doing jujitsu, right? But often like a little bit of time off of jujitsu, if you had spent 1 more hour doing jujitsu instead of 1 more hour doing chess, I would argue that some of the like the neuro pathways that get opened by doing chess or like reading a book about a completely different topic can actually unlock something for you, or like make you see a pattern in a different way.
No, I agree fully as well. That's actually funny that's actually a BJJ mental model that Steve Kwan and Matt Kwan have created as well. That talks about how doing something that unrelated can actually unlock some sort of potential insight into what your actual goal is. And I've had that mindset of, if I put 100 hours into the X guard position, if anybody puts me in the X guard position, I'm going to have more time there, therefore I'm going to win from the position, which I think there is some truth to that. Yeah, but like you said, if you can get overly tunnel visioned and
And I
and
think
then you pretty much are at a
another
loss.
thought with that, because that's like a common one. I think like it seems like that whole idea of like the if I invest 100 hours, and they have like
Yeah.
every jujitsu competitor I've ever talked to has like done that, like without talking to each other. They've like done that math
Yeah.
themselves and like, well, if I put this, then I get 1 more hour. He's fucked, right? But
It's a logical
yeah,
conclusion.
it's so logical. But actually, I came up with another way to explain that I think kind of counters that point or that thinking on top of what we were
Tell me.
talking about with unlocking creativity, but not even from a creativity standpoint. I think like a lot of people really like this idea of be a master of one thing, not a jack of all trades. Like fear the guy who's
A
done one
pure.
technique 10,000 times, not the guy who's done 10,000 techniques
Yeah.
one time, right? And everyone loves that stuff. But I really believe in jiu-jitsu that it is better to be a jack of all trades than it is a master of one. And like my argument using that same analogy with like the point system or the 100 hours of investment, right? Is like, let's
Hmm.
say that you if you have like a spider guard, right? If you have a good spider guard, like you're like a 10 out of 10 in a spider guard, okay? Or say you have like, let me think how to explain this. You have like 10 points to invest, okay? So I could invest 10
Yes.
points in spider guard, 10 points in collar sleeve, 10 points in whatever, okay? So people often think, okay, well, I want to invest 10 points in double sleeve, or I want to invest 10 points in collar sleeve, and they want to pick one. They don't want to get mixed, because then if they're only a 5 in each, they're kind of weaker in both, right? But what I would argue is that because there's so many attacks that exist within transitions. So for example, if I have a collar sleeve and a double sleeve, like if I'm playing collar sleeve and my opponent knows that position well, like passing it, right? When I'm playing the position, they're in their head thinking in terms of this guy can only do what is possible within the collar sleeve system, right? So he's focused on that. But if you have a double sleeve as well, when you're in collar sleeve, you're only one grip change away from being in double sleeve. So you can actually play one position in such a way that you navigate the guy. Like another way to think about it is like within one system, like collar sleeve, right? There's like within that system, there's strong positions and weak positions. So if I'm in collar sleeve and I already have my leg inside the elbow knee space, that's like pretty strong, right? If I'm in collar sleeve
Yes.
and my leg is trapped, that's like less strong, right? So
Yes.
when you can play one position, you may be in a certain like body positioning that is weak in collar sleeve, but if you made one grip change in double sleeve, that would actually be very strong, right? So when
Hmm.
you learn to transition multiple guards, you unlock all these additional attacks. So my argument would be is if you, instead of investing 10 in one guard, if you invest 5 in each, you get 5 in collar sleeve, 5 in double sleeve, and then you get like a bonus extra 2 points for the transitional attack. So you gain 12, right? So that's kind of like
Hmm.
something that I think a lot of people miss out on when they try to expertise in one thing, is they miss out on all these additional attack benefits from learning to mix.
No, I would again agree fully. There's actually a video game that I played as a kid that expresses this point perfectly. It's called RuneScape. And
Oh
shout out to
yeah, dude, I
anyone who
used to play
plays.
RuneScape too.
Man, RuneScape's the shit.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Anyway, I was all about just being a pure, like a strength pure or a range pure, and somebody who would just shoot the bow and
Yeah.
wouldn't focus on any sort of defense or any sort of anything else, any sort of attack points. And then when you were to fight somebody in the wild and they have like a little bit of everything, you're fucked. Like it's
Yeah,
it's
for
hard to
sure.
do anything just because you're not hitting on them, just because they have a little bit of defense. But when you fight somebody that is just a pure, just like yourself, now you're like killing each other and just blowing everyone up. But
Man, I
it's
could
funny
go on
how
so
it
many side
correlates.
tangents about RuneScape and like mining for like gold and stuff for hours and like, oh my God, just killing like
It's
noobs and stealing their stuff. Oh my God.
it's like,
Uh,
man, it's
but
one of the best games I have to say in the world.
yeah, it was so fun. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think usually to defeat someone who is much bigger and stronger, you have to compensate with complexity is usually the case. So
Mm,
if your position is very like one dimensional, it's just like all things being equal, the stronger person, the more athletic person is going to win, all things being equal, right? So
yes.
if your system is relatively simple, it only has like 1 or 2 steps in the system, it's easier for your opponent to digest it and understand, right? But the more complicated it gets, the harder it is for someone to overcome that with just purely strength, right? And that's kind
Yeah,
of like probably the play style, like being a pure archer would be like, oh, I stay at range and I just shoot. But then the play style with
exactly.
doing some sort of mix of like mage, archer, warrior is like way more complicated because it's like you have to do some sort of spell that makes them have a distance from you, then it gives a boost to like, and it's really complicated, but then that allows
And then you go in for the 2-hand whack.
Yeah, for sure.
No, I think that's exactly how it is. It is funny. I've spent so much time tunnel visioning onto one aspect, especially the De La Riva pants position. I have nearly solely played that position at Atos in the competition room for years.
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask you about
constantly.
like the creative process of like how you came about doing that and
Yeah,
everything. Do you have any thoughts?
of course. I do. Yeah. I find at least that for jiu-jitsu, it's kind of about this whole upper body versus lower body transitioning. When I start going for the upper body, they're normally going to defend everything on the upper body. Say I'm playing a collar sleeve, and they're going to defend that by bringing their legs or their lower body closer, therefore giving me access to the pant grip, which is really what I want to begin with. I find personally that lower body positions have a much higher success rate of actually sweeping rather than upper body positions. I think upper body are more so for submissions. And personally for me, when I look at submissions in a competition scenario or a competition setting, the risk versus the reward, sure, there's a high reward, but the risk to me just isn't worth it, because maybe the percentage of actually getting a submission on somebody in competition is lower than if I were to just try to focus most of my energy on just sweeping. So that's kind of what I built my game around, is just what is the most efficient way to sweep somebody and get on top and get that 2-point lead, so that I feel that confidence boost right in the beginning of the match. And I found that it seems to be these lower body positions, this collar pant position. And from this position, everybody wants to just step over your leg. Everyone wants to constantly force you into a headquarters position, because it is one of the most.
Real quick, for those that don't know, you have a video on YouTube or somewhere about that whole position, right?
Yeah. No, I have multiple videos.
So yeah, if you don't know what we're talking about, like check that out to see, like, because Conner is really famous for we just call it the come up sweep, right? Where you grab the collar and the pant leg, bump them over,
or
and
the
you come up and
sweep,
take them down.
one.
Yeah, or the seagull
exactly.
sweep.
Yeah. I call it.
Is that because like they're on one leg?
That may be a better way to think of it. My idea was I'm gonna rise up like a seagull, and then I'm gonna sweep them down and then start fucking them up. That's the idea. Not very good.
There you go. Okay. Well, anyway, you were saying, sorry.
Yeah. So basically, from this collar pants position, your opponent only has a certain amount of attacks, and one of the main attacking positions for them to start entering is this headquarters position. And I've kind of almost specialized in defending headquarters attacks from my opponent on top. And in becoming good at understanding this, everyone wants to put you there, because that's what everyone is taught to do. Put everyone in headquarters when they put you into De La Riva. And it just enters into all these different sorts of elevations in which I've starting to realize, or I realized a while ago. And basically it allows you to enter into the position in which I currently think is the strongest sweeping position in jiu-jitsu, which is a single X, or the X guard position, just because you're directly underneath your opponent's base, directly underneath their center of gravity. You can easily outbalance them. So that's how I actually.
Have you ever played with like sit-up guard bush, like in the Lucas Lepre manner?
I have a little bit. I find it's a little bit more difficult because of those who are so good at passing half guard and so good at forcing half guard. And I find the foot on the hip bone, even though it's not technically the hip bone, but even really, really high up, not necessarily on the leg, isn't enough to stop them. And I also, the main reason why I don't play that position is because I don't want to have to deal with any sort of backstep battles. And I know, like, if you understand what I mean.
For sure. You mean when you come up on the single leg and they try to backstep?
Yes, and they backstep, exactly. Yeah. I prefer not to have to ever end up in that situation, so I prefer not to sit up. I personally prefer to stay in this kind of collar pants battle, or collar even belt battle, and just constantly use the elevation. But I am starting to use more
Yeah, see, that's my
sit up guard as well.
in my opinion, those are the two strongest sweep positions in jiu-jitsu. Like you said, it's the single leg X variation, and then for me, the
Yes.
sit-up guard system. It's probably because I trained
Yes.
with like Lucas so long, but like for
Yes.
me, I like really love that sit-up guard system, and like which is really interesting because I'm classically people think of me like an open guard, double sleeve, collar sleeve player. But like even if I'm fighting someone who's like really big and strong, I always feel great in that like classic Lucas system. But I was curious to hear that because I feel like when you're playing De La Hiva, you do a lot of like with the collar grip. Do you do a
Yes.
lot with like this sleeve grip as well? Because I feel like the sleeve grip often turns into like the more Lapri style sit-up guard or De La Hiva X. But I find mixing
Yes.
them works
You
well. Do you
said
use that
you
much?
said it. I actually I only go for the sleeve grip when they're forcing down my De La Hiva side pant leg and not allowing it to enter inside for an X guard transition.
Mm-hmm.
Because for X guard, I obviously have to bring both my legs underneath my opponent's base or in between their two legs before I can actually enter the situation. So that normally they control that De La Hiva side leg, and I have to break this sleeve grip. That there can, I have to break the sleeve. I have to break the hand grip that they have on my pants in order for me to continue my various transitions. And that
So you're
leads me
saying
into
you're breaking the one that's on your De La Hiva leg.
yes, in
Oh, with the
order I
cross
break
sleeve
that exactly with the
Okay,
cross sleeve, always retaining the pants. And now that opens up for various De La Hiva X entries.
gotcha. Do you ever
I
do the
have
far sleeve?
I do sometimes. It really depends on what the person's trying to do. I do like to do the far sleeve to kind of force my opponent to post entirely on his far leg.
Yeah.
And then now you have X guard transitions as well, or you have sit up guard transitions also. Everything is good. I personally don't use the sleeves as much as maybe I should, because I just find that the collars and the belts and just keeping that pant grip is enough for me to create some sort of an off balance for me to enter into a more dominant position rather than having to deal with the sleeves. If that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think for me, when I play my De La Hiva system, the reason I like the sleeve so much is like I usually, if I'm in De La Hiva, like with my left hand on the ankle or the pant leg, I'm
Yes.
controlling there, and that's often one of the like the most common initial entanglement grips you get. Because if you imagine like you're on your back, you're defending them trying to pass, you block, you just grab the ankle, right? It's like super common to just get a hold of their ankle, and then my right hand is looking for the next grip, right? And then I like the sleeve a lot because I have a lot of attack systems from there. But the other thing I
Yes.
really like with it is when I go for it a lot and they hide their sleeve a ton, then it really exposes the collar grip in such a way that they don't have a grip on my leg. So then it's like easier for me to like kick their leg out or tap the floor to start boloing. And I kind of use those in
Sure.
conjunction. But I feel like I kind of came more from sleeve control first, and now I'm getting
Yes.
more into the collar control. So I'm trying to like find the fusion between those. Do you have any tips on the come up sweep itself that you feel like is a major detail people are missing when they're trying it?
100%. There's the major tip that people miss is they think that they need to be standing up on the traditional side hip or the traditional side butt cheek, I guess you could call it. For example, for both the technical, classic technical stand up and the modified technical stand up, which is basically when you turn your legs into a Z formation, you have the collar and you start standing up. These are all things that you guys can check out on my videos as well. But for those two different variations, you stand up on your right side. And for the seagull stand up or this come up sweep, you must completely transition your hips all the way to the other side as you push your opponent away,
So you
rather
would
than
be on your
standing up on
left
that
side,
right
right?
side. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that
I would
makes, yeah, that's
switch to
how I
my
would
left
imagine. Yeah.
entirely. Exactly. And,
Gotcha.
and it has a lot to do with the reaction in which your opponent is giving you. And as you know, whenever you force somebody to their hands above you, their main reaction is to try to bring their weight back, take their hands off the mat and realign themselves with you. And in doing that, they're creating force in the direction in which you want them to create force in order to create momentum and force them backwards in the motion in which they're going, allowing you to stand up easier on your opposite side hip, meaning your left hip, rather than your right hip for those other two variations.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And I found that this whole idea of momentum or creating momentum is probably like the best way to sweep somebody or really create a strong off balance. If you notice that you're trying to force them one way and they're putting all their force the other way, just push them in the same way that they're going, and you're going to create something. And it's so simple, but just so incredibly effective.
Man, that's awesome. Do you have any thoughts about like training schedules, training volume, like how much, because a lot of people talk about you need to train 2 times a day, hard as hell twice a day. Some people talk about, where do you find that balance? Where do you fall on that?
So when I was at Atos, and I just moved to Legion, I would say maybe almost a year ago during this whole pandemic.
Yeah, so it's probably not even a normal year really, right?
Sure. But I had this mindset that you're referring to, this 2 a day. Everyone is, you have so much peer pressure when you're in such a scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like a cult. Yeah.
It is, unfortunately. And everyone is saying like, oh, like you didn't train last night. What's up with you? Like, oh, you're weak or what? You have problems? Are you hurt? Oh, you're just a little bitch. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
100%. Yeah.
And it's all bullshit at the end of the day. Everyone recovers differently, especially if they're using drugs or not.
Yeah. I mean, that's a major thing too, right? Like from a marketing perspective as well, it's like, it's not a very compelling argument to tell someone who wants to get better at jiu-jitsu, who has like a 9-to-5 job and a family, like, you just need to suck it up and train twice a day, hard as fuck. It's like, well, maybe like better technique and smarter training protocol. I mean, if you wanted to get better at like bench press, right? We would never tell someone to twice a day do bench press as hard as you can 6 days a week. You would get weaker. No, it doesn't make any logical analogy. So the other point I always make whenever someone says something like, you need to be training 2 times a day, hard as fuck. Well, if I told them, oh, you need to be training 4 times a day, they would be like, no, well, that's too much. I'm like, oh, okay. So you agree there is a too much, right? So there is a too much. So the question is, how much is too much? Now we're just having a discussion of what is a realistic recovery rate. And then that's going to be based on the individual, right? And then it's also going to be based on, are they using performance enhancers? Which for me, like, I don't necessarily have like a problem with people using performance enhancers in their own personal life, especially if they're not competing against someone else. But I feel like they need to, at least when they're giving advice about training protocols, like divulge that information. If they're telling people, oh, well, you need to do this training protocol, and they're leaving out that critical recovery factor, it is a major factor. I think another thing that's big is like when you probably experience this when you get injured, is you realize how fleeting your physical state can be, right? The thing that stays with you is technique, right? So like for me, I won the worlds in 2011. I closed out with my teammate, Michelle Lange. And, right after that one, I started getting back pain all the time. And I was really pressured by the guys coaching at that time to keep training. And I didn't show up sometimes. And they were like, oh, you're being a fucking wimp. And, they really pushed me. And I started to doubt myself, and then I kept going in. And then I suddenly blew out my back. I got sciatica down my left leg. And then I started losing motor control in my leg. And when I actually couldn't stand on my calf, like I would stand up and my foot would just drop, right? When that started to happen, then I was like, okay, this isn't like, in my head, this isn't just like mental toughness. I'm literally losing motor control. It's like telling a person in a wheelchair to toughen up, like, it's like there's a neurological issue. That's when I really switched to like trying to be more scientific with like, what is too much, and focusing predominantly on technical evolution and stuff like that. But I would say on the flip side of the coin with that is you can get so far into that you lose the practicality of hard sparring. So people can get into like a circle jerk about like doing all this technical stuff, but if they're not trying it with full resistance, they can also get false positives on what's actually going to work under stress.
I think that was beautifully put, and your story gave me a little bit of anxiety, but
that's sorry. Right. Yeah. Well,
no, that's okay.
That's incidentally, that's like why I think it was a positive thing for me. That's why I like started the YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff. Because I realized I can't put all my eggs in one basket physically, you do the best you can, but you need to be a multifaceted person. And it seems like you used your time off really well as well.
I try to, that's for sure. But in regards to what you said, and in regards to my schedule, like I said, at Atos, I was in that 2 times a day type thing. And once I kind of broke out of that illusion that I must somehow appease others and feel that I have to do what others suggest for me, and they somehow have my best interests at hands, which isn't really true.
Yeah, for sure.
I've kind of devised my own training schedule, and what it currently is, obviously I am recovering from an injury,
Sure.
but what it currently is about 3 to 4 types of hard sparring a week, and 3 hard lifting and strength and conditioning sessions a week. And then the rest is teaching and technical study, I would say. And sometimes I roll very lightly on those teaching days, but really nothing crazy. That's about it.
It seems like the atmosphere at Keenan's, I'm guessing, is probably way better for understanding that and allowing you to have the space to do what you need as well.
I would definitely say so. Yes, and there's a certain degree of freedom as well.
That's huge.
That I don't have to take this class, and I don't have to watch somebody else teach. I can focus on whatever it is that I want to do in the corner.
Yeah, I mean, at my gym, that's basically like in the morning class, it's effectively, we just come in, and I always tell the guys, I'm like, look, technology is always evolving. And so how we learn is always evolving, right? So like, if you were to go back, like, 1,000 years before they had the printing press, like people didn't have books to learn from, right? So they had to like have conversation and stuff, right? I mean, I don't know when they made the printing press. I'm pretty sure it was sooner than 1,000 years ago, but it was like what, the 1500s or something. It doesn't matter. But like now we have YouTube and this like platform for learning. So even, teaching in class in some way, it makes so much more sense for me to give all of my students access to the entire database library of all of my techniques, right? And then for them to show up to the gym and go, hey guys, work on whatever you need to. You can literally have your phone out and reference it. And then when they have a problem, they can raise their hand. I'll come over and answer their specific thing, rather than subjecting the entire class to watch something that like probably 50% of the class already knows, or is good, they're not interested in that topic. So they're just going to mentally check out. And it's just so redundant. So I'd rather just allow people to work on what they want, have access to a database of video, and then just like they have more freedom and thus more passion and drive.
No, I think I do a similar drill with the students in the competition class here at Legion. I have them do 3 minutes on any techniques that they want to do, anything they want to do for 3 minutes, and then they switch with their partners, just like the classic drilling method that most professionals seem like they use, at least in jiu-jitsu. Like 3 minutes, any technique, and then switch. And anytime that they have a question, go ahead.
One question I have with that is, how do you deal with, because whenever I give guys like, the freedom to kind of work on things, some guys, they don't know how to authentically test for like false positives. Cause like sometimes I'll be like, yeah, work on whatever you want. And then like I'll walk around and then I'll see someone doing something. I'm like, objectively, there's no way in hell that will work. And it's because they've kind of like, they don't understand how to like specific spar well enough yet, or they don't know how to test it. So sometimes you'll see guys just like a high rep drilling something that like you'll look at and you're like, this is just impossible. Do you have any perspective on that? Like when you...
Yeah, I constantly am walking around and trying to make sure that they ask questions if they have any sort of doubt on the technique in which they're attempting to apply. And if I see something inherently wrong, I will like stop them and be like, hey, maybe you should try it this way or this way. But it is a hard thing when you give somebody so much freedom and they just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah,
I think the only thing that I do is just try to help them as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I usually try to like, I'm like very big on like, you need multiple training formats. So you have like a time for like creativity, and then you have a time for like hard Shark Tank to push that like mental toughness and that like realism of it. And then I have time for like specific sparring, and even specific sparring, I have like specific sparring where you go from the position, you fight, and then you go again. And then I have like specific sparring with the discussion where you can actually try, and then you go, okay, stop, go back, try it again. This time, can you do it? You can actually have dialogue.
Yeah. Why didn't this work?
Yeah. And I try to like consistently have a conversation with the guys about like the philosophy of training. so that they learn to like, you know, they have an idea, they test it once, and then they have their opponent slowly scale in some resistance so that they're getting real feedback. Because I feel like that's one of the, I think it's something that you probably intuitively do, and I probably intuitively do. But then when I watch students, like if I haven't taken the time to explain like how to properly like try something to be technical, but also get like have your opponent give you realistic feedback, that people will waste a lot of time.
No, I mean, that, I think you said it. That sounds, I think you do personally, just as a compliment to you, you definitely have a really good training mentality.
Oh,
And
thanks a
I'm
lot,
trying to
yeah.
actually copy that
Well,
to a great
it comes
degree.
from a decade of a terrible back. So
Yeah,
let me,
for
I'm
sure.
gonna pull up some questions because we posted
Sure.
online to
Yeah,
see.
I'll pull up some of mine as well. See if
Yeah,
there's
pull up some
anything
of yours. I'll pull
worthwhile.
up some of mine. Let me bring this up real quick. I think we already covered a lot of them actually.
Nice.
Creative process, valuable lesson. Yeah, what's one of the most valuable lessons you feel you got from like a coach or a mentor? Or we could, another question in the similar thing. What do you feel like is one of the biggest mistakes you made in your career?
I think the biggest mistake I made was to allow my ego to dictate my training. Like how we talked about, when you're in such a competitive environment, we actually talked about this yesterday. When you're in such a competitive environment, it's hard to allow yourself to focus on things outside of your A game and focus on improving things that you're not good at, focusing on the holes in which you know that you have. You just prefer to continually just beat on what you are good at. And I think that comes down to just being afraid to lose, being afraid to actually have somebody of a similar skill rank to you beat you and give you that feeling of like, oh, like I'm not that good in this position or this position or that position. And I think if I had taken that out of my mind earlier, I would be much better than I am currently. But that's something that I'm obviously doing now. And I'm actually, due to understanding this, I'm really throwing myself into judo. Actually, I'm trying
that's
to
awesome.
become as good at judo as possible. I'm studying judo on the side. I'm practicing with a bunch of friends judo at least twice a week and constantly trying to force a stand-up scenario in literally just a short time of focus, of controlled and what's the right word? Just focus basically on this other art. I have already seen an insane increase in my ability to stand, even with guys who are good at jiu-jitsu. I have no more fear of standing in position with them. I have no more fear of going.
Do you
for
notice that
attacks.
like my experience when doing things like that is like the ego, you know, in jiu-jitsu, it's like it kills the ego, but then like as people train longer and they get better in the gym, the ego comes back, right?
100%.
And when you do something like judo, because you have no expectation on you when you're there, it's not like you're like, oh, that's Conner DeAngelis. He's you know, it's just like you're just the dude there, right? Then you can go in with this mindset like, oh, it's fun. I'll lose, and you develop more of that like playful vibe again because you're not expected to do good. You know, I think another
100%
thought with the ego is like, there's two ways to deal with that, right? I mean, I think objectively the best way is to not have an ego, to actually like do some deep work and uproot the ego and be like, it doesn't matter if I lose and, you know, whatever.
Sure.
But in the reality, if you're at your gym, whatever it is, and then they hold a super fight and you're fighting in front of the entire gym and everyone's watching and like your girlfriend's there and she's watching and like all this stuff, of course you want to win, right? Like, you know, and like, so there is this realism of like people have egos. And that's why I like, you know, things like the specific sparring and like the resistance drilling that like Tommy and Espen do a lot. I don't know, I talked about that somewhere before. And like those formats of training that actually circumnavigate the ego, it's almost easier than like, cause like to actually uproot the ego, you have to go to like Tibet and work with like the Dalai Lama. And like, you know, you really have to do a lot of deep work. Meditation. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. You should really meditate and work on that.
I'm on
it. But probably the easier thing for people is like when I set the training up. So it's like, okay, you guys are doing specific sparring. Okay. the person on bottom, or, pick what you want to do. So say the person on bottom is like, okay, I'm not that good at collar sleeve. So I'm going to start in collar sleeve and I'm going to try to sweep or submit and you're going to try to pass. After each sequence, if I sweep or submit or they pass, we can stop, kind of discuss it. We can kind of like, oh, can you do this next time? And we can play with it. You almost develop a vibe where it's like, you're still going really hard, but like, it's like you're both working together to unlock the patterns of what is happening. And then it's like when you lose, it doesn't even matter because it didn't count because it's like not real sparring. And I have found consistently, like when I go travel or like if I have someone visit the gym and like really high level, a lot of guys, especially if you're at like a smaller gym and you have like some high level guys in the gym, they'll usually roll with each other like one time in a night, right? Because it's like, this is like, everyone thinks like, oh, they want to go hard all the time. But most guys who are like the top dog, especially in like a smaller gym, they get used to being the top dog and they'll kind of just like, I don't want to go with that guy this night, and everyone wants to kind of take the easier rounds. But when you do it that way, it's so much easier. Like when me and Espen would train and like at Wolfing, like we would do regular rounds sometimes, but like if we did like hard regular rounds, we wouldn't want to go with each other every round. But then we would do specific or we do resistance training and we would train directly with each other for like an hour and a half consecutive, and you get so much more mat volume with someone who is of your level. And I think it's worth people sometimes when they see that in themselves, maybe it's better, like I said, to uproot the ego completely, but sometimes just calling it out for what it is and circumnavigate it by designing smart trainings that uproot the ego or allow you to walk around the ego is useful as well.
I think that was beautifully put. I need to do more specific training, just as you're saying, and actually just watching your videos, I have already implemented more specific training into my training already. Like it is something that I constantly put out and tell people, as well as Andres. I teach with Andres every Monday through Friday.
I gotta have him on here. He's so awesome.
No, he is. He's one of the best characters in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask earlier. I was going to put that on the podcast questions, like who's the coolest person at Legion and why is it Andres? Like,
it's true. He's so cool. He is cool. But I think you're 100% right. Maybe not completely getting rid of the ego, because it does probably take tons and tons of meditation and hours of sitting in a room by yourself and trying to figure yourself out, rather than just trying to, or you can just circumnavigate the ego. I think that's a great way to put it. That should be a quote. Don't try to get rid of your ego, circumnavigate it.
Circumnavigate it, yeah. Did you have some questions from here? You said you...
Yeah, let's see here. What should a white belt focus on is one of the questions. What do you think?
I think
it's a rather general question.
I would say the most important thing in the beginning is good guard retention, for sure. There's a lot of like nuances to that question. I would say the most important thing is to completely disregard your performance in normal roles, right? You have to like see jiu-jitsu as parts, right? Like it's you can be good at finishing a triangle choke and terrible at escaping mount, right? And so people, when they start jiu-jitsu and they're a white belt, they kind of like, they'll think in terms of like, they learn a couple techniques and then they go to a normal roll and then they lose in the normal roll and they see that as like evidence that they're not getting better. But it's like, it's like trying to learn to play a musical instrument, right? And then like you work on the guitar. I don't know what, you don't do the guitar like this, it's like that, but you work on the guitar and then like suddenly you have to play drums. You're like, fuck, I suck at the drums. It's like, yeah, you were working the guitar, right? And that's how jiu-jitsu is. Each of these positions are their own separate thing. And when you can understand that, it makes you take everything way less personally. So if you instead, when you're a white belt, instead of thinking about doing better in normal roles, you go, okay, I want to get good at finishing a triangle choke. And then you find a friend or a partner you can work with on the side, and you just start in the triangle choke and learn to finish from there. As problems pop up, you go, oh, he did this. How do I solve that? And then you solve that over a week or two. And then you do that with an arm bar. And then you do that with like side escape. And then you do that with like holding double sleeve or holding collars. Eventually, if you just forget getting better and you view it almost like school, just getting good at all these random side projects, eventually all those side projects add up. And then when you're in a normal role, you're like, oh, I'm in double sleeve. I know what to do here. Oh, I got a triangle choke. I know what to do here. Oh, he's passing. I know how to retain guard. And then it eventually adds up. But people are so focused on the final product that they get frustrated when they don't have progress in that. But all the final product is a collection of the individual systems.
It's funny that you say that, because that's exactly how I built my jiu-jitsu, whether I was doing it consciously or not. Exactly. I started with, well, I want to create a strong game or a strong style. And I started with playing from the Delhi position. I was like, okay, this is pretty good. And then I started spider guard. And after about 2 weeks, I was like, this doesn't really feel that great for me. And then I moved on to X guard, and I had a lot of success from there. And then I moved on to butterfly, and then moved on to collar sleeve, etc. And then after all of those pieces were played for 2 weeks, and a basic understanding of the position was created, I went back and was like, okay, which position did I have the most success with? It was X guard. Okay, I'm just going to put a bunch of marbles into this area, and I'm just going to focus on how can I enter this position? How can I create this situation from every single reaction in every single position I'm being forced into, from reverse del heave on one side, reverse del heave on the other side, del heave on one side, del heave on the other side, collar sleeve, upper body positioning, and lower body positioning. Just tons of different situations. And eventually you create a game in which you have basic understanding of all different positions that you're going to be put inside, and a way to get to some sort of a home base. What do you think about having a home base? Do you think it's necessary, or it's eventually?
I think I think the home base will kind of come naturally to you. I think you do need to have kind of a home base, but like it'll evolve over time. Like at one point, my home base from Garb was like maybe double sleeve, right? Now I feel like pretty good in a lot of different positions, right? And that will evolve over time. So sometimes I think the actual intentionality of being like, I want to be a spider guard guy, I want to be this, can become so stifling because you're like trying to force it. Whereas if you instead just go, I'm going to spend 2 or 3 weeks on this, 2 or 3 weeks on that, what actually works best for you will kind of naturally come to you. Yes. And then also sometimes, like, if you kind of trust just spend time, like I talked about, in developing each individual position or system. And then when you're in a normal role, I try not to think about much, because usually your subconscious will pull what the most useful tool is at the time. Because you may think, like, let's say my spider guard's my best position, right? And then my collar sleeve is like so-so, you know? Well, I might fight a guy who trains with Michael Lange, and he's like the best spider guard passer in the world, and he's not good at passing collar sleeve. So versus that guy, actually, my collar sleeve will actually work better. And I wouldn't be in the match thinking, I need to make my double sleeve work. I would probably be there like, whoa, this doesn't feel right. Because I'm just getting put out of position when I go there. I go to collar sleeve. So I think some of those things, if you just spend time learning, they'll actually self-solve. But yeah, I think another thought I had just listening to you explain kind of your process. It actually sounds kind of like what you did, which was you went through everything and you kind of came to X-Guard because of the results that were happening. You didn't predefine it, right? But one thought I had was that I think no matter who you discuss, like whatever high level competitor you talk about with their like mental map of like how they learn or what made them get good, you're going to find a lot of variance in it. But I think one fundamental thing that's important is that you need to reflect a lot on your training. And that's something that I see that a lot of people don't do. It's obvious to me. You're like, I want to get better. Like, you know, how am I going to do this? Like, I'm going to work on this position. I'm going to work on this position. And like, you probably after class reflect on, even if you don't write it down, maybe, or maybe you do, you probably at least reflect on like, I mean, most people I've seen who got really good, they reflect, right? Yeah. So you have to have this period. I tell all my students, okay, before class, if you can, just take 5 minutes and try to watch some competition videos, some instructional, just 5 minutes every day before class, just a little bit. It doesn't need to be much. And that's going to gestate in the back of your head and affect your subconscious when you're rolling. And then take like 5 minutes after class with the notes or just thinking about it and reflect on what was working, where you were having a hard time. And if you embed that little habit over a long period, it'll make a huge difference. But I think a lot of people, they just kind of train and they drill what their coach shows and they think that that's going to be enough. And if you're not engaging in your own individual self-reflection, and I think this applies to a lot more than just jujitsu. It's kind of a life principle. Like if you're not applying your own self-reflection on what you're doing and you're not engaged in that process, you're going to struggle to make progress in every aspect of your life, I feel.
No, I agree fully. In regards to note taking, I think notes are just an incredible way to kind of solve what's happening in your mind and
Mhm.
putting your thoughts on the paper to allow you to, not necessarily on paper, it could be on your phone. I have
Yeah.
over
Yeah.
like almost 1,000 jiu-jitsu notes
Oh
just
yeah,
on
me
my
too, man.
phone,
It's insane.
just trying to figure out a certain problem that I had after the training. Because every single time that you roll with somebody who's better than you or somebody who can actually give you some sort of a difficulty, you're going to realize there's a position that you're trying to force or apply that isn't working properly. And
Yep.
then after class, that's when I'm like, okay, well, why didn't this position work? Is there a different solution that I can find? And then I start thinking of the solutions in my mind,
Yep.
thinking of the solutions to those reactions. Then I'll write them down in my phone or type them in right away. And then that's the first thing that I'm thinking of when I enter training the next day. So I never stopped improving on those thoughts. The thoughts
Yep.
are never entirely lost. Like I needed to find a solution to X and I didn't find it quite yet. And I'm going to try this new solution that I thought of yesterday. And if that doesn't work, I ask my
Yeah,
professor or
for
I ask
sure.
whoever, do you have another way that maybe I could beat this reaction that my opponent's giving me? And then you finally find the answer. And then now, boom, that's another piece put into your puzzle that actually works. And now you're ready to move on to the next problem that you encounter.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, objectively, the goal isn't to train. The goal is to develop, is to reprogram your patterns so that you make the right moves, right?
Yeah.
So, Naval Ravikant. He's been on like Joe
I
Rogan
don't.
before. He's the CEO of AngelList. He's a really smart, like thinker, entrepreneur guy. And he has a quote I really like. It's make money with your mind, not with your time, right? And that's like the difference between like, making a product and selling it is making money with your mind. You create something and you sell it and you can scale it. Making money with your
Mhm.
time is like, doing a private lesson. That's just trading like an hour of your time for,
Yes.
a certain amount of money. And the same thing applies with jujitsu, right? Like if someone wanted to get better at jujitsu, think about if you just took three guys, you didn't teach them anything, and you just told them, okay, you guys are just gonna try to get good at jujitsu, but no one's gonna show you any technique. They don't know how to do an armbar or anything, right?
Mhm.
And their only training format is just going psycho hard with each other every day without any thought. Like, how long would it be until they discovered the omoplata, right? I mean,
It
it
would be a
might
while.
be, yeah, it might be years. It might be like, or what about a berimbolo? I mean, it could be, I mean, the berimbolo didn't really, or the matrix didn't really become a big thing until like, after 2012 sometime, So like realistically, like, I mean, it might be like 30 years until they discover some of that stuff. So when you understand that you get better at jujitsu, not just by hard training, but by actual reflection and research, and it's like an intellectual endeavor on top of the physical. I think a lot of people, the whole purpose of the physical to me is it's two things. It's to get the cardio shape, but technically, if I could run, you could be like a triathlete maybe and get into really good cardio shape. So the main thing to me is I see doing jujitsu as like the necessary process to get the feedback I need to make the reflection to reprogram my patterns, right? But if I can
Mhm.
save 100 hours of psychotic training to get the same answer, then I'll do that, right? And I think that's like where utilizing film watching, reflection, conversations is huge. I read this book, Rational Optimist, and it was about like it's an argument for why we should be generally optimistic about the direction of society, even though it seems really dark at times.
Hmm.
The one thing they talked about in the book was, what is it that drove humans to evolve so fast, so suddenly, right? And his argument in the book was that we're the first species to really figure out the whole trick of trading. Like you're good at hunting, I'm good at fishing, so you do all the hunting, I do all the fishing, and we trade, right?
Mhm.
And that really, like, it seems obvious, but really thinking about that deeply is like, yeah, man, like, God, think of some of the ideas I had that took me like 20 years to figure out. I can give that to someone in like a day or like in,
Yeah.
in a minute, right? And that was partly what drove me to go train with like Tommy and Espen in Norway. I was like, man, I'm really trying to develop my crab ride stuff. Why would I sit here for 10 years just trying to figure this out when I could just go over there and then just be like, train with us, be like, hey, what would you do here? Boom, he gives me the answer. And
Yeah.
think about how much time you save by intentionally cross
Tons.
training and discussing with other people.
Tons. I think you hit the nail on the coffin with that one.
Oh. So what's up next for you? Are you competing anytime soon, or how's the knee?
I would say possibly I'll be competing at Penn's in September. I believe that's the next major tournament to come into the scene. And at the moment, my focus is purely just gi grappling. And at the moment, really, my goal is just to improve my ability as an instructor and to improve my judo and these other aspects of jiu-jitsu that I've neglected for too long. So I'm trying to just become a complete grappler and then focus on competition afterwards.
I think that's the right path. I mean, I know for me, like when I switched to like coaching a lot and especially the YouTube channel, that really made my game improve a ton because I stopped thinking about, well, what do I got to do to win? And I was like, well, people on the channel want to see this kind of a technique. I'm not that good at it yet. And I don't feel comfortable showing stuff that I myself haven't really like mastered in the gym. So then I would just go on these deep dives trying to learn something to show it. And that made me like forget my whole game and just develop. And I feel like I improved more in the last year and a half than I've ever improved because of the YouTube channel. So I think you're going to have a very similar process, as well as like, you just seem to be such a thoughtful, intellectual person. I'm really excited to see your progress.
I try to be, and I think I'll have some new thoughts on jiu-jitsu from this deep dive into judo that I'm about to go into.
I'm excited to see it. Is there anything, any instructionals or YouTube content you want to mention?
Yeah, I have two instructionals, one on the side smash or the over, under position. It's basically a course all about spinal manipulation. That's on Jiu-Jitsu X. It's called Passing with the Side of Smash. And then I also have an entire course on the singular X position, tons and tons of different entries, because that was my whole style for such a long time, just forcing that position from everywhere. So if you guys like to play singular X, that's a great system that you guys can copy at least a few things from. That is on Jiu-Jitsu X as well. And also I'm creating little by little more and more content on Instagram, and I'm getting back to YouTube as I improve as a teacher. I feel like I want to be able to provide very, very high quality content. So I'm kind of working on myself before I jump back into that.
Sure.
And other than that, you guys can follow me on DC_DeAngelis or look me up at DCD Jiu-Jitsu. And I have free content all the time, Instagram, everywhere, little mini clip videos that maybe will help you guys out a little bit. That's put with a beat, so maybe it's a little bit interesting as well.
Awesome.
So
yeah. Well, I'll put a bunch of links in the description and stuff if you guys want to check that out. All right, man. Thanks for coming on. It was great talking, and hopefully I have you visiting here soon.
Man, I'd love to. And thank you.
Take care.
See you.